Welcome to another episode of Teaching Tip Thursday with DrTiff. Today's focus is going to be STEM Talk. We're going to get started. STEM today is really an important topic, and you'll find many classrooms across the United States, especially, I'm sure in other countries, that are really looking at STEM from the perspective they may not have considered previously. Today, we're going to be really diving into what it means to be integrated in our planning for STEM learning experiences, especially in the elementary grade. I am a elementary school teacher by trade. I taught elementary school for about 10 years and then went on to be a math coach and went into higher education and did some teacher training. And so I really believe that it's important for teachers to really be exposed to the varieties and ways in which they can make STEM experiences so much more enriching. And my experience with working with teachers and with instructional coaches across various school districts, I put together some ideas that I think have been really helpful, and they have reported that have been helpful to them as they are beginning to think about how to plan effectively for their students. So today's conversation is going to be around that topic. I hope that you'll stay tuned to the very end because I do have a giveaway that I'm looking to share with all of those who connect with me beyond this platform. Let's continue. Just as an overview of who I am and my background, I just mentioned that I have a history of education. I've been in the educational field for over 20 years now, and I absolutely love it. I think that teaching is such a joy. I love working with young people. I love working with adults. I also love working with those who aspire to be teachers. And so my many of the years of in the last maybe 10 years or so, I focus on teacher education. I've been a full-time faculty member at the rank of associate professor in colleges of education. I'm right now a director of program where I have an opportunity to work directly with students and with faculty and with other VPs and others that are at the institution. But interestingly enough, I'm at a school that is completely focused on STEM. And so it gives me another opportunity to think about the importance of this work and why I'm putting it together in the way that I have. And so today's opportunity for you is to listen and to learn and think about ways that you can apply this information to your own spheres. So with the teachers that you work with, if you are an instructional coach or if you are a classroom teacher, how you can maybe reconsider the ways in which you've been rolling out your STEM instruction. So the first focus or the first audience that this particular presentation is for, as mentioned, is for instructional coaches and for classroom teachers. Can also be very beneficial for administrators or anyone who is thinking about wanting to implement a STEM instructional program. It will be very appropriate for you as well. But the conversation that I'm going to be having today is going to really be focusing on those individuals who really particularly fit in the two categories that I just mentioned. I'm also going to outline the development of a STEM integration model that I developed in 2018. And this model, I think, has so much potential to really help teachers to understand how to integrate the various content areas effectively. Getting started with instructional coaches, there's a few questions that I think are important for us to consider as we move forward. The first is, what are the areas of strengths and weaknesses, and even successes? When instructional coaches are working with the teachers in their schools and working in those classrooms, it's important to be able to ask some important questions about not only of the teachers that they're working with, but also of themselves. When it comes to STEM instruction, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What areas have you really seen some great success? And then also, how would you rate your ability to be able to approach, to guide, or to support people? This is going to be a really important question, especially for instructional coaches who are thinking about how to effectively move STEM instruction forward in the school environment and really begin to ask themselves what type of skill sets that they themselves need in order to be a proponent of change in those spaces. The next question would be, what are your challenges in supporting an integrative STEM instructional platform? Do you know what it means to be integrative? Do you know what it means to really provide that level of support? Where do you see some gaps, and how can you use what you know to fill in those gaps? And then what are some supports that you need in order to be an effective instructional coach? When I work with coaches, these are the types of questions that I ask. These are the type of conversations that we have. These are the type of things that we unpack and we challenge ourselves. I invite the coaches to be honest and be open. And if they don't know, to say that they don't know and know that they're in a safe space where those questions can be effectively answered. The next thing of what's important is assessing the needs, not only of coaches, but also of classroom teachers. So, how would you rate your comfort level with STEM learning experiences? Where have you seen some areas of growth? Where have you seen some areas of improvement? But the big question is, how comfortable are you? Do you feel like you could roll out a STEM instructional lesson even today? And so, for those teachers or instructional coaches that are listening right now, what is your comfort level on a scale of 1 to 5? One being completely uncomfortable, totally scared out of your mind, and five being off the charts, complete confidence in being able to deliver the level of instruction around STEM that you know would be effective and engaging for students. How would you rate your comfort level? How would you rate the comfort level of integrating other subjects? So you have your STEM content areas that we're going to talk about, but there's also levels around other content that can be integrated to make it more meaningful. Another idea would be to integrate the A, which is the arts, and that would turn the STEM into STEAM. There's other ways of integrating reading that you may have heard in sort of in the conversational arena of STEM, and that's going to be integrating that R, which would now, of course, change STEM into STREAM, and also including that A, which is of the arts. So there's so many different ways in which different content areas can be integrated. I would posit that because there's so much reading that's involved in science and technology and even in mathematics, you may not necessarily have to integrate the art specifically, but there are spaces in schools in which they have really made that a primary focus for themselves. And so they want to remain cognizant of the reading that's connected to all of this. And so they have intentionally integrated that R to make it stream. The next question would be, what are your challenges with integrative instructional STEM? What is it? That may be the first question. What is it? And what are some of the challenges that you've had with integrating content effectively? That's important for us to consider. And then if there have been areas of successes, what have those been? Sometimes we're making progress and we're thinking about our challenges, but we don't always stop to assess the successes, the areas where we really have done well. And I think that in this case, it's going to be critically important. So when we're thinking about the classroom learning environment, we're thinking about all of the pieces that come together. We're thinking about assessing learner outcomes. We're thinking about co-planning as we work with other teachers. We're thinking about this co-teaching model, which is connected to the co-planning and then the co-reflecting. And so when teachers and coaches work together, there's a collaborative opportunity. And when teachers work with other teachers, it's also collaborative. And so the image that you see in front of you just depicts this relationship between the instructional coach, the classroom teacher, but also teacher to teacher. That's really important. And I think that as in my work with teachers, one of the things that they have emphatically explained is their excitement to be able to work with their peers as they are planning and rolling out some instructional plans. That co-planning and that instructional planning time embedded in the day has been shown to be very, very effective. There's so much research around embedded professional development. And in my work with teachers, especially during the day, I've seen a distinct difference between the involvement and participation and even excitement with teachers that during professional development that's done during the day as compared to at the end of the day, like an after school sort of environment. And so if there's any administrators who are listening, I would encourage you to consider ways in which you can have embedded during the day professional training for your teachers because they really show that it is very, very effective. So what we're going to do is we're going to just review some of the content, and this content is going to be around STEM. So we're going to be looking specifically at the science, the technology, and engineering and math. I'm going to break them up into parts, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. I have some videos that are connected to each of those sections, but in light of the way that this presentation is rolled out here specifically, you'll see the links below in that section underneath this video today, and you can click on those links individually to be able to access the videos that are related to two of the areas I'm going to be discussing. So technology, I'm just going to jump right in with technology because that is one of the areas in STEM where teachers sometimes don't have the clearest understanding. So I'll just say, what is technology anyway? There's a great YouTube video that really outlines some really nice ideas for students, but also for just adults who are just wanting to understand how technology can be effectively integrated in what they are doing, and to understand that technology is not limited to digital resources. So we're on the digital platform here, but there's a lot of other things that that are involved in technology. They're the actual tools that people use that can make life so much more effective. And when you watch the video, you'll see more of that. But I think it's so important for not only for students to understand, but just for the instructional leader and the instructional deliverer to understand that technology is so rich and there's so much of it and it's all around us and it's ever changing. It doesn't remain the same. And so it's going to be really important that teachers are taking the time to unpack these content areas for themselves so that they can effectively unpack it for their students. I want to add that I have additional videos that are connected to technology and a few of the other areas that take each part take it apart very systematically and sort of and very methodically so that teachers will have an experience with each of these content areas. And so there's standards connected to technology. There's all types of activities that teachers can roll out in their classrooms that are beyond the digital resources that we often use. And so that's in the subsequent video, but I wanted to let you know that this technology is such a rich concept. The next thought I wanted to just jump right into is around engineering. And so, what comes to your mind when you think of engineering? Do you think of towers? Do you think of bridges? Do you think of designing of some sort? Do you think of taking something that seemed maybe complacent and very basic and making it more elaborate? If any of those thoughts ran through your mind, you would be correct because engineering is such a complex concept. But what's so wonderful about engineering is that there's so many different areas. There's so many different types of engineers, and they are vast. And so a student can express an interest in a particular area around engineering, and it may not even be something that's even been explored as yet. I think the basic idea around engineering is that engineers answer and they solve problems, and they solve a problem based on whomever is having it. Who has the problem? Why is it important to be solved? And these are the type of questions that engineers ask themselves. So when an engineer is coming into an environment, they're coming in because they're coming in response to a problem, to a situation that needs to be solved. And so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment, but they're also going to point to the fact that there's another link here that helps to outline a little bit more about engineering. And I will be very transparent in saying that in my beginning work with STEM, engineering was one of those areas that I was not as familiar. And it really took a lot of unpacking for myself. And the more that I began to understand the power of engineering and its connection to technology, I began to be all the more excited and all the more interested in helping others to tap into their own excitement around engineering. And so this is so exciting for me, even as I'm sharing this here with you today. I hope that you will be ignited to learn more about the engineering aspect as well. So let's talk a little bit about what engineers do. And here's one design process. And as I've talked with different engineers, they explain that each type of engineer may have a variation of this design process, but this is the basic one. So step one, an engineer is defining the problem. They're saying, what is the problem that needs to be solved? They unpack that, they dissect it into different parts, and then they begin to go to step two, which is the brainstorm on how they can solve the problem, how they can reach some reasonable level of resolution that's going to respond to the need that's been presented. The next level is level three, where they're doing research, because a good engineer never just goes right in and starts to build or cut or chop or reassemble or disassemble. That engineer is thinking about the research. They do a lot of digging. They ask a lot of questions. They pull together all of their resources to be able to really understand even deeper what the problem is and how it can possibly be solved, how has it maybe been addressed in the past, what new things need to be done. Step four is to develop ideas, taking ideas that have been galvanized from the research and the brainstorming session and put these ideas together in some type of meaningful way. Step 5 is where you develop a prototype or a model. So they don't just automatically start building things that other people are going to use. That's the other thing. It has to really be something that is there's a model, there's a prototype of some sort before it gets rolled out into like a larger production for anyone to utilize. The engineer has to know if this thing is going to be tried and true because in many cases, engineers are working on problems that affect people in their everyday lives. So they have to be very sensitive to how they respond to these particular issues. Step 6 is a test and evaluate. Taking those ideas, taking that model, taking that prototype, and seeing, does it work? Is it effective? Do you think it could be useful? And at that point, they begin to communicate what they found. And at the communication stage, or after that, they may be thinking about how to scale up or begin to implement this particular plan that they have designed. So there's so many types of engineers, and here are just a few of them that come to mind. Just a few. And I would even tell you that there's probably a whole bunch of other engineers that haven't even been realized as yet. So we have civil, we have chemical, we have software, we have nuclear, we have electrical, we have computer, we have mechanical, we have IT, we have medical engineers, we have all types of things that aren't even listed here. So many types of engineers are a part of the process in helping people to make their lives more efficient, more effective in what they do, and basically to make their lives easier. And so engineers work on creating things that are actually the technology that help to make lives very easy and more efficient for us all. So the two areas that you probably have heard the most about is math and science. And so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on unpacking math and science. But what I will say is that at the elementary level, mathematics is very rich, and science is even more so. Unfortunately, in some classrooms across elementary schools, science sort of takes a back seat sometimes. And that is really unfortunate because there's so many elementary, basic, rudimentary skills that students need to understand about science and their relationship with math. Like, for example, in this photo right here of the math photo with the ruler, rulers are applicable whether you're working in science or mathematics. You're measuring, you are calculating, you are investigating. And so there's a natural connection between math and science. There's a natural flow between those content areas that sometimes I really believe that educators miss. Remember, we're talking about STEM tonight. This is a teaching tip Thursday. We're talking about how you can take what you're doing in the classroom and make the connections more real for your students. This is what the discussion is tonight. So let's begin to think about the relationships between math and science, how those two content areas complement each other very naturally. Let's not lose sight of that. Yes, we have content standards for math, there's content standards for science, there's there's even content standards for engineering and for technology. Some don't even realize that, but we have them, especially here in New York State. And I would suppose that in other states, there are other standards that are also rolled out to show the relationship between these four. But it's really, really important that we recognize that there is a natural integrative aspect with all four of these. So why STEM? Why is it interdisciplinary? Well, the nature of STEM has been designed and has been sort of put together to show these natural bends, these natural connections. It is designed to be integrative. It's designed to be interdisciplinary. It was never designed to be a silo-based singular approach to learning. It was designed to be thematic. It was designed to be cross discipline. It was designed for that. And so unfortunately, sometimes people miss that. But I think when they put those ideas together, they realize that all four of them, when they're together, become such a mighty and powerful way to teach and way to learn. There's a natural connection to all of these. It just makes sense for science, technology, engineering, and math just to flow together. There's so much richness to all four of them, and they naturally fit. So why reinvent the wheel? The challenge is to move away from teaching subjects in isolation. All too often in a lot of our elementary school settings, teachers are teaching math at one portion of the day or one portion of their week. Same thing, science may come in at another day. You think about reading comes in at another point. Technology and engineering never really actually gets taught in many cases because people think about STEM and the one thing that they focus on happens to be the engineering. They're thinking about building. They're thinking about the structures that they can put together. They have not been as many. There's some sites and resources on the internet where teachers can access some really rich STEM experiences, but in many cases, it's very isolated. You're looking at one aspect and missing the other. And so it was my intention a few years ago to think about some models, some ways in which STEM instruction could be delivered that would make the learning so much more meaningful and not isolated, to move away from the isolation, but move toward this integrative model. So in 2018, I published a document and published a model, which is listed here. It is called the Will Model for Integrative STEM Instruction. And what this model denotes is that you can take any one of the four areas, you can start at any point, and you can effectively and meaningfully and intentionally link one concept to another. You can look at what's happening in your math curriculum. So if it's a second grade math curriculum, where students are working with numbers, whole numbers, double two-digit numbers, and they are adding and subtracting numbers up to 100. And so they're practicing this skill. They've been learning this in mathematics. Then a teacher can naturally, that would be sort of the starting point. Okay, to think about that as main instructional content. I want my students to practice. I want them to really become more proficient in this area to gain some mastery of their addition skills. Then you can think about what's happening in your science curriculum. Naturally, you have a science set of documents, a curriculum, you have a set of standards that dictate what it is you should be teaching at that grade level. And you can think about what is a natural progression toward looking at the addition aspects in math and some concepts in science. And so let's say that you're looking at temperature and weather in science. And so in weather, you have temperature that are usually double digit, and perhaps you're looking at comparing those numbers, which one is greater, which is less, what's the difference. So then you have an opportunity to compare numbers, to add them, to subtract them, probably more subtraction if you're looking at difference in temperatures, greater temperatures, and what type of things affect that. There's a natural bend toward the science. Then it links again to something, it could be in technology. And in the technology aspect, perhaps they're looking at some digital resources where it's going to help the students to understand weather patterns and how patterns have uh, increased or decreased over time. And so you can have specific websites that have already been designated for students to explore. Many students in schools have iPads, you have computers that you can access. And even if you don't have all of that for your entire class, perhaps you have one that you can project onto a screen, and then it can be one sort of collective experience with looking at some data that you've collected, and have students sort of play with that data. They're using the technology is at their hands. They're having an opportunity to be exposed to it. They're seeing the application of the mathematics of this addition that they've been working on in math. They see its connection to science, where it deals with weather. And now you have that fourth aspect, which is going to be your engineering. And now you're thinking about what are some problems that people have when they are in frigid temperatures, perhaps. What are some issues? That may be a concept, that may be something. So, what's something that can be engineered to either help people to be protected in cold weather or to give people information about the weather? I'm just coming up with these things really off the top of my head. And I'm thinking about how all of these areas can be completely integrated. It takes some time to come up with some meaningful lessons, but this is something that can be done. And it's something that can be done in probably, a couple of class settings. Think about a theme across a week. These concepts can completely be integrated and connected one to another. So this model was just a pictorial representation of how integrative STEM can happen. How each one of those areas are connected, they're meaningfully integrated, they're meaningfully yet explicitly a part of the learning experience. So, in addition to the model, I came up with some definitions that help to explain what it is that we're doing. So, the WILL model for integrative STEM instruction invites teachers to identify a content area to lead the instructional progression for a STEM learning experience. Once the main content focus is identified, this can be in any one of the STEM areas. The goal is to identify the other aspects of the content areas that complement the main content focus in the most appropriate ways. And that was just what I explained pretty quickly, but yet I explained it. And the definition that I think is important for us to keep in mind is around intentional integration. And this is combining all four areas of STEM with distinction and fidelity. And so if we go back to this model here for a moment, we're thinking about this is a reminder to include all four areas, the science, the technology, the engineering, the mathematics, with fidelity and distinction. It's intentional. It's an intentional integration. And this model is what is really designed to help teachers to be mindful, to not gloss over anything, to not just assume that the math is taught, to not just assume that the science is in there or the technology is in there, or just have them just build something and then call it all STEM. It really pushes teachers to think more creatively and proactively about how they are rolling out instruction. And so I leave you with this teaching tip around this concept is and with this question around this teaching tip is how intentional are you? How intentional are you at integrating the content that we know is critical for our students? STEM is a critical topic. It's been around for some time, and I really don't think it's going anywhere. In fact, I think it's all the more sophisticated. Just as a natural example, I was working with a group maybe a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about healthcare, and we're talking about the technological aspects of healthcare and how all of the technology that happens in hospitals and with what doctors are using. And if you've been to the doctor lately, you've probably noticed that the nurses don't come in with the pads anymore, the little clipboard things. They have full laptop carts or a full computer cart, and they're typing things in to computers, or they have some type of iPad that they're putting your information in. You go in and you can now see your medical records on a portal. And then what comes with this new technology and this technology integration is the vulnerability. Like people's information can be tapped into, can be taken, and there's all kinds of laws around that protects that. But things can happen, and so I say that only to share with you that this idea of the technology and the connection with the science and the engineering and the math is not going away, and it shows up even in your everyday world all the more. And so, how important is it for teachers to be proactive in this area to make sure that they are providing learning opportunities that are going to be meaningful for their students, but also challenging themselves to think about instruction in a way that they may not have in the past. This is what integrative STEM instruction is all about. So in the vein of helping teachers to develop a meaningful experience, I have designed a lesson plan, and this is actually a Word document it moves, of course, and so teachers can input their information. And you'll see that the four areas are represented on this lesson plan template. It was initially designed in 2015. I revised it in 2019 to be able to show teachers how they can effectively incorporate some important topics. And so you have your math concept, your science, your engineering, and your technology. I invite teachers to think about what integrated thematic topic they're exploring. In the example that I just shared moments ago, I talked about numbers and science, or maybe it's around, being more proficient in weather, or being more unprepared for weather conditions or something like that, maybe the topic. There's some essential questions that teachers can develop that will help to germinate the thinking in students' mind, but also to assess them effectively. And so that will go down to number 5 with assessment that is, of course, connected to your learning outcomes and objectives. And so there's some questions down there at the bottom, which are actually connected to engineering, the inquiry-based sort of activities around what is the problem that needs to be solved, who has the problem, and why is this problem important. And those are 3 questions that engineers often ask themselves when they are working on any type of project. So I know that I went through this pretty quickly, and hopefully you'll have an opportunity to go back and to look at some of the links that I'm providing below. But I wanted to just stop right here and say thank you. Thank you for tuning in for another Teaching Tip Thursday. I look forward to hearing your feedback. Please leave a comment, drop a comment in the section below. Let me know your thoughts on how this information can be beneficial to you. And just as a thank you once again for tuning in, I'm inviting you to stay connected. And for all of those who stay connected and who sign up to DrTiff Speaks as a way of staying connected with me, you will get a freebie. I'm going to be sharing an example of a full lesson plan that has been designed by a group of teachers and myself. that is that's a full STEM, integrated STEM lesson plan. So I want to be able to share that with you as a thank you for signing up and staying connected to me and to all that we're doing here with Dr. Tiff Speaks. I just want to just say I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening, and I hope that this information has been helpful to you in some way and that it will leave you all the more informed about how you can make STEM instruction a powerful element in what you do every day. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, day, morning, whatever time you're listening to this. But I do appreciate your time, and I will be back at touch again soon. God's blessings on you. Bye now.